Today, we are going to discuss the top three teams in the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics, and the Philadelphia 76ers. But before we jump into the teams, Davis, how is your day going so far?
I'm doing well, Brian. How about yourself?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. So let's just jump straight into it. Of those three teams, and I think nearly universally, those three teams are considered the top teams in the Eastern Conference. And some would even say that they're the top three teams in the entire league, depending on who you ask. So, which team do you want to start off with?
Let's start with the first seed Bucks. I think obviously they're having a fantastic season, being the first seed. In I believe they have the best record in the league, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they're the number one team in the league right now. Everyone's finally kind of slowly getting everyone's getting it together. They had a great trade deadline, though it wasn't like they didn't have any crazy trades. They did acquire a key 3 and D player in Jay Crowder, and so I think in the long term he'll definitely help out the team with their depth in regards to guarding any star players. While some of the guys are on the bench, so definitely a great pickup there. So I don't know, it's hard to really there's not too much to really talk about the Bucks as they are a fantastic team. One of the best top 10 in offense, the number one rebounding team, and one of the top defensive teams in the league, obviously. Yeah, so I'm gonna go into what they do really well. And so in terms of what the Bucks are doing well is obviously they're great at utilizing Giannis' strengths as a whole, even though he did not play tonight, I believe, and they still beat the Nets. Obviously, Giannis is a freak of nature physically. He can attack the rim at will, and nobody could stop him with his strength and speed and athleticism. And since he's able to draw double teams, the Bucks surrounded him with a wide variety of different shooters that are generally pretty good at shooting threes, right? So like guys like Grayson Allen, Drew Holiday, uh, occasionally Middleton, though he's having an off season, so I'm not sure if I'm going to include him this time.
Yeah.
For this
Connaughton,
year, yeah,
Crowder.
Joe
Yeah.
Ingles, which has also been a great acquisition for them this off season, I believe. So definitely did a great job surrounding Giannis with a great team, and yeah. In addition to that, Drew Holiday made the All Star team for the first time in I believe 10 years difference between
10
his last
years.
appearance when he was on the Sixers, I believe, many,
Yep.
many, many years ago,
Mhm.
10 years ago. So it's pretty crazy to see. He's having a great season so far with almost 20 points a game with 7 assists. So, you know, that's pretty much all that really have to add regarding the Bucks. They're having a fantastic season, best team in the league, based on the wins and loss columns. So yeah, what are your thoughts, Brian?
Yeah. So the Bucks are peaking at the right time, right? They just won 16 straight, and they lost a game the other day, but they are peaking at the right time. Um, and right now, they're a top defensive team. I believe they're top three. And the one thing that they have changed this year in terms of their defensive philosophies compared to years past is in years past, Coach Bud would basically not allow teams to shoot in the paint, right? He allowed teams to shoot outside shots, especially the three, right? So the way that teams have punished the Bucks in the past is, you know, just by being able to get good open shots, and it's literally that simple, right? So that's why you saw teams like, the Nets when they had their, their star players before all these trades. They were a very perimeter oriented team, right? So which was a massive flaw. So that's why 2 years ago they were they were able to easily beat the Bucks when two of the three stars were like healthy, right? And even back to when into the bubble when the Heat were able to beat the Bucks despite Giannis being an MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. They were very, very perimeter oriented, right? With Duncan Robinson and like Tyler Hero and Jay Crowder and so on and so forth, right? So the one thing that the Bucks have very, very altered this year is that they only allow their opponents to shoot 33% from a three, right? And they only allow them to make 11 threes per game, right? Which is right now, that as we stand today, that's fourth best in the league in terms of defensive allowing 3 points made. So the Bucks have completely altered their defensive philosophies, right? Yeah. Which actually works well because ironically the Celtics are top 4 in terms of shooting in 3-point attempts, right? And not only that, the Sixers are in the top 10, right? So in terms of the Bucks, their greatest strength is their defensive philosophies that have changed to be much more perimeter oriented, but also Brook Lopez and Giannis have been amazing defending the interior this year, right? And then not only that, to your point, the Bucks have so many guards and wings to throw at the perimeter players on both the Sixers and the Celtics. Obviously, Drew Holiday, Pat Connaughton, Khris Middleton, even though it looks like he's taking a step back, Jay Crowder, Wesley Matthews, even though he's at the tail end of his career, they have a myriad of players that they could throw at the perimeter players of the Celtics.
You're talking about perimeter players.
Yeah. So they have a tremendous balance right now, and obviously they have the best player, in my opinion, that's not only amongst the 3 teams, but possibly in the league, right? So in terms of the advantages that the Bucks have and some of their the positive attributes that the team brings, those are some of the main things that I am focusing in on right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. You brought up a great point. They definitely changed up their defensive philosophy, as you mentioned before, to be more perimeter defensive oriented in regards to their defense. Because obviously, when you have guys like Brook Lopez, who has improved on his defense over his career, I believe when he played for the Nets many moons ago, he was not the best defensive player. And it kind of progressed over time. And I think the craziest thing is also improving his 3-point shot drastically, right? Where the guy barely shot threes his entire career, and all of a sudden can shoot threes really effectively, especially as a big man that's heavily valued in today's NBA. So there's that. I mean, we also forget guys like Bobby Portis, who contributes a ton on the team, kind of like the underrated guy who does the dirty work, grabbing boards, getting tip in, playing defense as well. He's kind of like I won't say he's like the biggest guy, but he's more of like a hustle guy who's willing to be very scrappy against other teams' bigs as well.
Yeah, he can change the dynamics of the teams when he subs in, because he's a perimeter big that can score on the perimeter, who hustles, which allows the Bucks to put Giannis at the 5, right? And there are so many mismatches that you can pull that with Lopez at the 5, you get the 3-point shooting and you get the rim protection, but in terms of foot speed and in terms of guarding 5-out teams, which the Sixers can do and definitely the Celtics can do, Bobby Portis allows the Celtics to match up whenever the Celtics or the Sixers play 5-out basketball, right? And he's a much more offensive threat compared to Lopez, right? And allowing Giannis to play at the 5 is probably the biggest mismatch that you can totally have, because no one can guard him when he's at the 5, and he can guard anyone when he's at the 5, right? So not saying that he can stop Embiid if it comes down to it, but he could definitely give Embiid trouble, right? So
And it's not just that, but there aren't too many teams in the league in general that have a dominant five. So I mean, yeah, he's gonna have
It's
tougher
two.
matchups.
Yeah.
Yeah, like yeah, I mean, I mean, well, at least in the East, right? Embiid, and Harford isn't the same guy he was, over 10 years ago, right? So it's
Yeah.
gonna be, I think, Giannis has very
Yeah.
favorable matchups in the East
Yeah.
for sure as a big.
The one concern I do have about the Bucks is that we have a month left into before the season ends. Like literally the regular season ends on April 9th. So we literally have a month left. Khris Middleton has not looked right all season. Right. There are days where he moves okay, but his shot isn't there. And there are days where he just can't move. Not can't move. He doesn't move as good relatively to how he was the last few years. Right.
Right.
So he's been coming off the bench for the majority of the season. He's been missing games here and there. He hasn't played on the majority of back-to-backs. While Jrue Holiday is having one of his best statistical seasons of his career, Jrue Holiday is not a consistent playoff offensive player in historically speaking, right?
Right.
He's not someone that you want to depend on as your number two offensive player, right? Because Jrue Holiday has to work really hard for his shots, and he's already working really hard in defense, especially in the playoffs. He doesn't get easy shots.
No,
So
definitely not.
you need whether it's Khris Middleton or someone else, you need someone to be a consistent number two scorer because you want Jrue to be able to focus on defending the best perimeter player on the opposite team and not
Playmaking.
overly exert himself on the offensive end because you're just gonna burn him out, right? I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but in the season where the Bucks went to the finals, like Jrue had some great offensive games. He had some terrible ones, right? Because he's just overexerting himself on the defensive end. So the one area of concern is probably Khris Middleton, and I don't know. I don't trust any of the backup point guards that the Bucks have. Like, yeah, they just pick up Dragic.
Yeah.
Sure. Sometimes they play Joe Ingles at guard.
Yeah.
He's okay, but I mean, like he can't really defend, quick guards. Javon Carter is a decent defensive guard. Off his offense kind of comes and goes, so they don't have a
Right.
reliable backup guard. But this is me nitpicking. But those are probably the two main areas where teams could possibly exploit the Bucks.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like if Middleton can't play like he used to, so like other players have to pick up the slack. Someone on the bench, maybe it's Connington, maybe it's Crowder, because I think those are the two guys who can provide defense. At least at more of the like the swingman positions where it's like between the 2-3 give or take, or even like with Crowder at the 4, right? Because he's a stronger guy.
Yeah,
So it gives you some flexibility there. Like Javon Carter, I believe he's only what, like 6'1",
6'1".
what 6'1". Yeah, so he's gonna be a smaller guard, and he can only guard like once, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah,
So depending on matchup, you might be able to throw him to play defense. But that's about it. And I totally agree with your point because if like Jrue Holiday sits, like who's gonna run the
yeah,
offense? Right. I mean, yeah, I think Ingles is a great passer. But again, you also highlighted his biggest flaw, which is defense. And yeah, the guy is also not that athletic, but he's a great shooter.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't. You don't want to heavily rely on Joe Ingles in the playoffs. Like you want if there are possessions when he can run the offense and run some set plays. Yes,
Right.
like there's probably a handful of those per game, but for 6-7 minute increments, that's not something that you want to do. Right? Whether it's him, Javon Carter, that's not something that's something that the other team could definitely exploit. Right?
Right. Kind of reminds me of like the whole Duncan Robinson situation
Yeah, yeah.
with the Miami Heat, where he's a great shooter, and then you realize that's all that he can do. And
Mhm.
then like if you think about how the Lakers beat the Heat in 2020, they literally just got the switch to Duncan and it just attacked.
Yeah.
It just scored a ton of points, but that's getting a little bit off topic. But that's kind of what the Joe Ingles situation kind of reminds me of if they
Yeah.
play him too many minutes.